For the first time in a long time, the Memphis Grizzlies will be winless entering the month of November. And it will be a very long month of November for Memphis Grizzlies fans and the team if they don't get things turned around soon. On this episode of Locked On Grizzlies, we'll focus on some positives coming out of the Grizzlies' loss to the Dallas Mavericks, two players in particular who struggled mightily, and if this is even salvageable at this point without the cavalry arriving soon. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello. Welcome to another episode of Locked On Grizzlies. I am your host for this episode, Joe Mullinax. Forgive my voice. I know it's rough. I promise I feel better than it sounds. Every year at the end of my football season, I seem to catch some sort of bug. And this year, it's one that impacts my voice, which is unfortunate for someone that hosts a podcast. But we're going to do the best that we can and keep marching along. Please forgive me. I promise there will be good Memphis Grizzlies takes, or at least some hot Memphis Grizzlies takes as part of this episode of the show. So stick with me as we break down another Memphis Grizzlies loss to start the season. For the first time in over 20 years, the Memphis Grizzlies are 0-4, I believe, to begin an NBA campaign. Today's episode is brought to you by the good folks at Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Again, this episode brought to you by Gametime. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts as proud members of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. Check us out on YouTube, like, comment, rate, review, subscribe, all those fun things. Thank you for making DeMichael Cole and myself part of your Memphis Grizzlies experience. No DeMichael with me for this episode. He is busy trying to maybe fan the flames over at the Commercial Appeal as the Grizzlies beat writer, probably trying to calm folks down. You guys know DeMichael. He's pretty good at that. He calmed me down on yesterday's episode. And believe it or not, I'm keeping that energy. I am not going to rant and rave for the next 30 minutes. I am not going to get angry and gesticulate and wave my arms and get frustrated as perhaps you expected. If that's what you were looking for, maybe you'll have to check out the next episode of Locked On Grizzlies after a game and see how Memphis is doing. I am actually going to try to be productive with this episode of the show and try to, in the next 30 minutes or so, come up with some answers, some things that can help improve what the Grizzlies need to do to get out of this hole, because the snowball effect is happening now. They are in a position where they are not confident, at least not the guys outside of the big three for the Grizzlies. And we'll talk more about that here in a moment. But it's obvious that they're starting to doubt themselves. There are missed shot opportunities that shouldn't have been missed. There were multiple missed defensive rotations that we'll talk more about throughout the program here. So much went wrong for Memphis, and yet three guys went very right. And those three guys were Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Marcus Smart. Those three dudes scored 83 points on 54 shot attempts against the Dallas Mavericks. They had massive games. Wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. Marcus Smart fouled out, had 6 turnovers. He played 35 minutes, so him fouling out didn't necessarily hurt his minutes per game. But still, 6 turnovers is way too many for a point guard. 9 assists, though, 5 rebounds, 9 of 17 from the field, 5 for 10 from 3, 50% from 3. Imagine where this Memphis Grizzlies offense would have been if it wasn't for Marcus Smart shooting the lights out the way that he did. Imagine where this Grizzlies team would have been without the ability of Desmond Bane to create opportunities, not just for himself, but as well as others, to go out there and put on a show the way that he did offensively. It could be really bad, and it still is not great, right? Being 0-4, there are no moral victories in NBA basketball. You either win or you don't. And one of the worst parts of all of this is that this loss sends the Memphis Grizzlies to 0-3 at home. The Memphis Grizzlies were one of the best teams in the NBA over the last 2 years in the friendly confines of FedEx Forum. To this point so far this season, that is not the case. And that is concerning in and of itself, but I'm trying to stay positive here. Desmond Bane, 3 assists, 3 steals, 6 rebounds, 12 of 17 from the field, and he was only 3 of 7 from 3. So that tells you that he was extremely efficient from inside the 2-point line. He made every 2-point shot he took except for one on his way to 30 points. Jaren Jackson Jr. has been the subject of criticism of late. A massive offensive game, 4 assists, 9 rebounds, 2 blocks, 3 of 6 from 3. He got to the free throw line 9 shot attempts worth, made 7 of them, only had 3 personal fouls in 34 minutes of play. You can't ask much more of Marcus Smart, Desmond Bane, and Jaren Jackson Jr. Those guys played their tails off. And you're going to need those 3 guys to continue to cook if you have any hope of, forget breaking this losing streak, trying to get back to 500 is going to have to be led by those guys, as long as especially Luke Kennard and Santi Aldama are out. And we'll talk more about those 2 in particular here in a little bit on Locked On Grizzlies. But you saw the value of the defense of Marcus Smart. You saw the value of improved defense from Desmond Bane. Again, 3 steals. Same amount of steals as Marcus Smart for Desmond Bane. You see the value of Jaren being a rebounder. 9 boards leads the team. 9 boards leads the team, and the Grizzlies don't get grossly out-rebounded by Dallas, +4 for the Mavericks in that category. Not a dominant showing. They were not blown out, so to speak, were the Grizzlies. They put out a good performance, those 3 starters. Of course, there's 5 guys on the basketball court, right? And we'll talk more about that. But assuming you get Freudian slip, assuming you get Luke Kennard back soon, right? Taylor Jenkins says he's out of the concussion protocol. It's a matter of time. Assuming you get Santi Aldama back in the next couple of days, and assuming once Ja Morant, they're 1 game away from being able to add Ja to that suspended players list, assuming that Bismack Biyombo, as Shams Charania of The Athletic reported, joins Memphis in the coming days, the cavalry is coming. You're going to have better depth that makes more sense within your rotations. But until that time, the Memphis Grizzlies still have a game to play on Wednesday, right? They have to find a way to try to get this fixed now, because they're going to Utah, and Utah is a difficult place to play. And if the Memphis Grizzlies do not find their footing beyond the big 3, because again, Smart, Bane, and Jackson Jr., y'all can get mad at them if you want. I'm not going to. Those are guys that played their tails off if you watch that game. Those are guys who did their best with what they had and competed admirably. I was impressed. I continue to be impressed with Marcus Smart. He's doing more than I ever thought he could. For those of you that have been following the show, Marcus Smart is one of the reasons I thought the team was going to start a little bit slower, because he's not Tyus Jones. But he is far from the reason the Memphis Grizzlies are struggling right now. He is one of the reasons they are competing in these games. But things fall apart. For the Memphis Grizzlies, it fell apart in the second quarter. Memphis was up by 6. There was an awesome end sequence where Marcus Smart got the steal, passed it to Bane for a 3 at the buzzer. The Grizzlies were leading by 6, and then Dallas rattles off a 37-25 second quarter, and the Grizzlies never recover. The Grizzlies never recover from that. So what does Memphis do from there? How do they try to start addressing the problems that are facing them? Well, I can think of 2 ways to address those problems. And I'm going to outline exactly how I would do so next here on Locked On Grizzlies, because there are two dudes in particular, and I'm sorry that DeMichael's not here because he would really want to defend one of them, but I'm flying solo today, baby, and I'm going to be able to speak my mind when it comes to two players in particular that are just really struggling for the Grizzlies right now. We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Grizzlies. But first, this episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by FanDuel. So it's early in the NFL season, but that doesn't mean that you can't score with the NFL season on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time to get in on the action. The app is extremely easy to use, and there's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and so much more. So what are you waiting for? Get out there and visit FanDuel.com/locked-on and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL. I'm coming after Jake LaRavia and Derrick Rose next here on Locked On Grizzlies. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am Joe Mullinax of Bluff City Media. If you don't believe that I can be positive, go check out Bluff City Media. Become an insider today. You'll see my latest piece over there. I still feel that there are reasons to be optimistic about the Memphis Grizzlies, despite the 0-4 start. You're seeing growth from Jaren Jackson Jr. as a passer. Desmond Bane, the All-Star campaign, continued in the game against the Dallas Mavericks. Zaire Williams, we'll talk a little bit more about him in a moment. Another game with 7 rebounds. I wrote about his growth as a rebounder. There are still glimpses and flashes of positivity. But there are two guys in particular that I just, on this particular episode, I can't be positive about. And it's not Xavier Tillman, who shot 3 of 14 from the field. X was 0 for 5 from 3. Dallas just purposefully let him open. They wanted him to shoot. They wanted that to be the choice that the Grizzlies made. And he took those shots and he missed. But X grabbed 7 rebounds and he had 3 stocks, 2 steals, and 1 block. He was a +4, where Jaren Jackson Jr. was a -25 in the box, or the plus minus for the game. But that's a great example of that individual box score plus minus being misleading at times. Because if you watch that basketball game, you know that Jaren Jackson Jr. wasn't a reason the Grizzlies lost. 2 of the guys that Jaren shared the floor with during his -25 run were far larger issues. One of them being Jake LaRavia, which I think all of Grizzlies fans, somewhat surprisingly, are united on. And another one there's not going to be some unity on, and that's Derrick Rose. Let's start with LaRavia, because that's the one that I think everybody's like, that dude cannot play NBA basketball right now. And it's true. A lot of the defensive issues that you saw with the Grizzlies, it wasn't just Jake's fault. There was a lot of overhelping, a lot of wide open threes for the Mavericks that they hit. And that is by design. If you want to criticize Taylor Jenkins for his defensive schemes, we can have that conversation. It's similar to Mike Budenholzer. This is something that has been the MO of the Grizzlies the entire Taylor Jenkins era. They choose guys that they want to take these threes. But against the Grizzlies, it seems like more often than not, they actually hit them. Whether it's Derrick Jones Jr., 4 of 6 from 3. Whether it's Grant Williams, 4 of 8 from 3. Those 2 guys were 8 of 14. That's a massive problem. The Dallas Mavericks shot 49% from 3 on 47 attempts. You're not winning many basketball games, regardless of how well your stars do, if that is the defensive output you have. The most glaring example of that is Jake LaRavia. He is lost almost every single defensive possession. He can't find his footing. He loses his man in terms of lateral quickness. When there is a dish off of dribble penetration, he doesn't get to the help side fast enough. The Dallas Mavericks singled that dude out. And in 6 minutes of play, they played him off the floor. They played him off the floor. Oh, and remember, this is a team that is down 5 rotation players. Or if you don't want to say that John Morant, Steven Adams, and Brandon Clark count for some reason, like they magically don't exist anymore, they're down 2 rotation players. They're down Luke Kennard. They're down Santi Aldama. So that's a relatively easy fix. Jake LaRavia will not be in the Memphis Grizzlies rotation once Kennard and Aldama are back. He wasn't in the rotation in this game because of how poorly he played. David Roddy logged some good minutes. David Roddy did some good things, 9 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, played almost 30 minutes, ate a lot of those LaRavia minutes that he was probably going to get. Because even Taylor Jenkins has to admit he did not have it in that game, and you could argue he hasn't had it all season. And maybe he doesn't have it, period. It's a little early to say that. First-round pick, give him some time to develop. But this is a team that's trying to win now, and they haven't won yet this season. So LaRavia can't help them in that process at this moment. Someone else who isn't helping them is Derrick Rose. And I know that there are people watching the show saying, Joe, that's a bridge too far. I can't talk about Derrick Rose that way. Well, I can. I can talk about Derrick Rose that way. And I can watch Derrick Rose play basketball and see a guy who is shooting under 30% from two-point land. Inside the three-point line, this guy did not score a single field goal in 14 minutes of play. I was told he was going to be a bucket getter, right? This is a guy who should be able to come in and provide instant offense. Not the case in this game. And you already know that he's a defensive liability. You know it. But you hope that his offensive production will offset it. Wrong answer. Didn't happen. And it hasn't happened. He is not a guy that you can count on to be an offensive producer. He is not somebody that you can rely on and say, he can give us 14 minutes of solid offensive production. You can't do it. It doesn't exist. And because it doesn't exist, they're going to have to make some tough decisions with an already thin roster. What are they going to do? Jake LaRavia cannot play. The theoretical shooting is not manifesting. This is not a guy that is providing you any offensive spark. He had 3 fouls in 6 minutes. He took 1 shot. -9 in 6 minutes of play. Joe, why are you harping on a guy that didn't play very much? Because he was that bad. And do you know how hard it is to unify Memphis Grizzlies fans about anything? Do you know how difficult it is to get Grizzlies fans to point at something and almost in unison agree? Almost as hard as getting Democrats and Republicans to point at something and say, yeah, that needs to be fixed and here's how. And yet here we are, unified in constant chorus about how Jake LaRavia cannot play anymore. Oh, and by the way, one of the reasons he's here is because the Grizzlies moved on from a guy who would 100% be helping them right now in DeAnthony Melton. Zach Kleiman's a heck of a GM, but these last couple of years, there's been some moves that maybe a little bit questionable, especially if you're a team that's trying to win now. Maybe Jake LaRavia becomes a good NBA player. He ain't one right now, and you need good NBA players right now. Derrick Rose, once upon a time, was a really good NBA player. Right now, not a really good NBA player. And those are 2 guys that are eating minutes that are negatively impacting the team. Is it all their fault? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. You need more from Xavier Tillman offensively. It's great that he's so good defensively. He finds ways to contribute. But if he's going to have wide open shots and not be able to make them, he's not helping either, folks. So it's not just Rose and it's not just LaRavia, but those are 2 guys that I'm not sure they're giving you what you need to be able to compete right now. How do you fix it? I'm a problem solver, baby. I'm here to help you. You let me help you figure this out. That's what we're going to do next here on Locked On Grizzlies. But first, I want to remind you that the Locked On Ultimate NBA Season Preview is here. It's a 6-episode series with all 30 of the Locked On NBA team shows. I've represented Locked On Grizzlies on that program. From contenders to tankers, they go in depth into the biggest stories heading into the season. Catch all 6 episodes of Locked On NBA on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Also, this is a friendly reminder that this episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Gametime. Never again do you need to have a frustrating ticket buying experience. Why are you doing this to yourself? You shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets for the next big event. Gametime has killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the best price guarantee. Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. You can see the seat immediately using that view from your seat option. And you have buying tickets as easy as 2 taps on a screen. You can do it in seconds. With the Gametime guarantee, you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Gametime will credit your account 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. When we come back, I'm trying to figure this thing out. I'm trying to right the wrongs. I'm trying to get the ship sailing in the right direction. Taylor Jenkins, I hope you're listening. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am Joe Mullinax. I promise there's not a frog coming out of my throat. There's not some creature dying in my voice. I apologize for the current state of affairs, but hopefully you've stayed with me through this episode of the show. DeMichael Cole, my wonderful co-host, busy closing up shop down at FedEx Forum from the Grizzlies' latest loss, this time to the Dallas Mavericks. Luka Doncic went off, but other guys went off, and that was really the difference. You expect Luka Doncic to go off. He's an MVP candidate. But Derrick Jones Jr., Grant Williams, you can't have those guys scoring the way they did, especially from range. So is it fixable now, right? How do you fix it for the guys like Marcus Smart? How do you fix it for Jaren Jackson Jr. and Desmond Bane? How do you allow for them to regain their footing and try to get a win starting with the Utah game on Wednesday? I have some ideas. First off, Jake LaRavia just doesn't need to play basketball again for some time for the Memphis Grizzlies. I don't know that you need to give David Roddy 30 minutes. I don't know if that's productive. But I do think that you take away that LaRavia role in the rotation, and I think that you feed those minutes to somebody like Vince Williams Jr. Give him a chance. He's a 3-and-D prototype player as a two-way guy. He's with the team right now anyway. Why not give him some run? See what he can do. G.G. Jackson, young and experienced. He can't be any worse than Jake LaRavia. Give other dudes a chance. And again, who it is, Coach Jenkins, your call. I just don't want to see Jake LaRavia get run because he's not ready. We know he's not ready. Apparently, you know that Kenneth Lofton Jr. is not ready because he continues to not play, even though the front court depth of this team is crap. You've chosen David Roddy as your 4 in front of Kenneth Lofton Jr., which, by the way, I don't necessarily disagree with. But my point is, you've got somebody in Jake LaRavia who's not helping you. Derrick Rose, you probably have to play until Luke Kennard comes back. If Luke Kennard is back on Wednesday, well, I don't know that you play Derrick Rose anymore. That's just me. I realize that the Grizzlies are actually going to play Derrick Rose. That's actually going to happen because they're, dependent on him. And there's lots of reasons why Rose is going to play even beyond the court. There are people that are listening to this show right now that are watching this show that are going to get into the comments or tweet at me or post, whatever the hell it's called now, telling me how I'm a Derrick Rose hater and I don't understand hoops. I don't get hoopers. No, I just watched the dude miss a ton of 2-point shots. That shouldn't be okay. Why is that hooping? Explain that to me. How is his movement and his ability to get an open layup and then miss it a quality that is good for the Memphis Grizzlies? We're not talking about one game. This is over the span of 4 now. We're getting a bit of a larger sample size. And he is struggling. Whatever lift he had a couple of years ago, it appears that it's gone. Doesn't mean it was a bad signing. Other people will say it's a bad signing. I think it made sense in the context of what they had to do. But I find it hard to believe that Luke Kennard can't provide similar things to Derrick Rose. And don't say Rose plays like Ja, because that's not true. Maybe the style of play is there, but you could say I play like Nikola Jokic then. That might be a bit of an over-exaggeration, but you get my drift. Derrick Rose is not that good that you simply say he has to play, because he doesn't. He doesn't have to play. Xavier Tillman has to play, but you have to find ways to get him offensively involved that doesn't lead to him shooting 3 of 14 from the field. He took 6 more shots against the Dallas Mavericks than Zaire Williams. That can't happen. X should be the one shooting 8 or 9 times a game. Zaire should be the one shooting 13 or 14 times a game. Those numbers have to be inverted. X has to make the extra pass. He's capable as a ball handler to get a couple of dribbles and then make that dish. Go do it. They're leaving you open on purpose. You do not have that shot in your repertoire. Move the ball. That has to be a priority. He has to allow for Zaire to create in the pick and roll and get him easy bunnies at the bucket if he's going to take shots at all. That has to be a priority. John Conchar, in 19 minutes of play, only took 2 shots. Again, we talk all the time about how he is a capable three-point shooter, and yet he refuses to take the shot. Refuses to. He has to keep playing as long as guys are out. You got to take that shot, John. You have to. Stop talking about it and be about it. Be a person of action. And then last but not least, defensively, Coach Jenkins, if you're listening to this, if you're watching, you cannot allow for your team to overhelp to the point where they are not able to replace back on shooters. Those schemes are not working right now. You do not have the personnel to make them work. You are giving the wrong teams opportunities for rhythm. You can't chalk it up to statistical anomaly. At some stage, it's the scheme. At some point, you have to look at what you're doing and ask why it's not having success. Game in and game out, all season long to this point. I realize it's only 4 games, but teams are cooking you from beyond the arc. Cooking you. Why? Because you are not able to make necessary adjustments. Why? Why don't you understand that these teams are taking advantage of you? You are one of the worst 3-point defending teams in the NBA so far this season. You're in the bottom third of the league. There has to be some level of adjustment. Has to be. Because in terms of what you're missing, Luke Kennard's not a defensive maven. John Morant's not going to come back and fix the defensive woes. The players that you are down are not going to contribute positively in terms of perimeter defense. You've got the dudes that are going to do that. You're not executing. The scheme is not working. So whether it's miscommunication because Marcus Smart and the like are still learning how to work together, that needs to be figured out. Have a practice when they're supposed to have an off day. Bring them in and watch film. This has to be refigured. Because it's okay to still be positive right now. They've only played 4 games. It's Halloween. They have time. But if 0-4 becomes 0-7, if 0-4 becomes 1-9, if 0-4 becomes 2-12, I don't care that the Lakers did it. DeMichael Cole is right. It's been done, but the Los Angeles Lakers also have arguably the best basketball player in the history of the game and one of the best bigs in the NBA on their team. Memphis does not have that. So yes, time is still there and there's still reasons for optimism. You're seeing growth in individual players. The team has to put it together. If they don't, this thing's going to get ugly real quick. And it might be out of hand before John Morant returns in the middle of December. That is on the table right now. Stop the snowball. Have to. Thank you for listening, watching to this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. I appreciate it. Thank you for dealing with my voice. Hopefully it gets better. We'll preview the Utah Jazz game. We'll get to Michael's thoughts on everything going on with the Grizzlies right now. Any practice or post-game conversations that Michael was able to have. All that will be on our next episode. Make sure you're checking that out. Thank you again, being an everydayer, subscribing, liking, commenting, rating, reviewing, wherever you get your podcasts, as well as over on YouTube. I know DeMichael appreciates it. I appreciate it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Until next time, be safe on this Halloween. Have fun. Stay locked in. Continue to subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Check us out on YouTube. I'm Joe Mullinax. I'm going to go get a throat lozenge. Have a good day.